Today's episode is a special one as we near the end of our first season. We've got a few more episodes coming in the next couple of weeks, then we'll take a short break and return in the second week of July. In honor of our incredible guests, who have been so generous with their time, so open with their stories, I'm sharing a few of their answers to my favorite question. What's your biggest fuck up and what did you learn from it? That's the only real format we have on this podcast so far. We might add more in the future, I don't know. But I do ask everyone, and the answers are always different. Sometimes funny, sometimes painful, always pretty interesting. What I love is that these people are at the top of their game, and yet all of them got there not in spite of their failures, but sometimes because of them. Now, I haven't shared any of mine, and I've had plenty. Some funny, some deeply not. But really, I think this podcast, this first season, is my fuck up. And you're getting to watch it in real time. If you've been listening from the beginning, you've probably heard the wobbly audio and the awkward edits and the messy bits. And as someone who's spent 25 years as a production professional, I find that really mortifying. But here's what I've learned. For years, I wanted to start a podcast. I've thought about it over and over again. But honestly, it was my experience that kind of stopped me from doing it. The pressure to do it perfectly, expensively, meant I never really started. And then about 12 weeks ago, I had a mini stroke, and I lost my ability to speak for a period of time. And weirdly, that ended up being kind of a blessing. Because at that point, the fear of doing nothing became so much more terrifying than the fear of doing something badly. And so here I am doing it badly. So yes, you're hearing us fail in real time, but you're also hearing us grow in real time. We're messing up and we're going to keep messing up. And I guess that's kind of the point. So, this, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it in this episode. You're going to hear us be bad, and you're going to hear us get better, and you're going to hear the audio vacillate. And I'm sorry for that. But here it is. This episode is kind of a celebration of that, I guess. Rafe Taylor learned that sometimes the money lost is worth the audacity. Eran Creevy learned to trust his gut and not just the gig. Kate Morrison learned that giving people a chance to show you grace can be transformative to you. And I think everybody I've heard one reminded me that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's often the prerequisite. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking with us. We're getting better. We're trying, certainly, and we're not stopping. Eran Creevy is a writer and director known for his work on Welcome to the Punch with Ridley Scott and the new Netflix show The Gentleman with Guy Ritchie. In this story, he opens up about the film that nearly derailed his career. What followed was a hard lesson in creative instinct, self-trust, and how failure can be the best kind of teacher.
The process of making a movie like Collide is a movie where I did something where it almost derailed my career. And, what did I learn in the process of making something like Collide? I think I sort of licked my wounds a lot after I made that movie. It wasn't very well received by critics. I knew the reasons why. I knew that was happening as I was going on to set. I knew that I was not making something that I could stand by. The script was kind of falling apart around me. But a lot of that was my own fault, they say the only strengths you've got as a director is what you say yes to and what you say no to. And, even Christopher Nolan has to say yes to the studio at some point, but he chooses his battles when to say no. And I think that now I would have greater conviction in what I stood up against and what I would take and whether I would just walk away from a project because I was just like, you know what, I can see that this is falling apart and I can sniff that out. I think that with Collide, in all respect to the script, I never truly 100% believed in it. Like the script, because it was written by someone else. But I thought that I was smart enough in order to make it work. I thought I was smart enough as a creative and an artist to kind of get the script to the place that it could be. But I never really truly believed in the film. I never really quite liked the script. And that was always an issue with my music videos. Whenever I didn't like the song, I often wouldn't make a very good music video. If I really loved the song and I really was into the music, I would often make a really great music video. It would be part and parcel of that. If I was doing commercials, so I was really into the product that I was selling. If I was really into what it was or the creative, I could, you'd always have something, you'd always push that a bit further and do something better. And I think I just had a niggling in my stomach when I made Collide that I kind of like, I don't know if this is the film I should be doing next, but they're offering me a lot of money to do it. It's a great opportunity. I get to work with some amazing actors. And what I've learned now is just to kind of remember that feeling and remember that. And if I get sent a script and there's just something in me that says, man, this is not for you. And there's a lot of good stuff about this, but there's something in my gut that says, this is not for you. This is not right. And I just think in life, you've just got to follow that feeling, just follow that gut feeling, and I'm not putting myself in the same bracket as people like Spielberg, but when he made Hook, he says a very similar thing. Like he never could get his head around that script and telling that story properly. I think he wanted to make it, but he just couldn't ever figure out what that story was or what the movie was. And something in his stomach told him this is off. And so he pumped just loads of effort into the production design of Hook. So when you watch Hook, it's like production design to fuck. It's like, it's the most OTT because Spielberg said, I just focused all my energies on the production design because I didn't really know the film I was making. And I think that's what happened to me when I was doing Clyde. I got lost. I didn't really know what the film I was making. It suddenly got rewritten, and is that Joel Silver's fault? Is that my fault? I don't know. It's just they're the circumstances that I put myself in. And I think what I've learned, I think, out of that process is to follow my instincts, to follow my gut instincts. And from now on, only do stuff that I'm 100% into and committed to. And I think that's what I learned, man. And that was a big life lesson. Lots of therapy to get to that point, though, Orlando. Lots of therapy. Lots of crying under a duvet for mum. I think there was a point in my life where I was pretty angry about what had happened, and I was quite bitter and angry, and I felt it was like the world's fault that the world was against me, and all I'd have done was tried to do a good job. But I think at some point you have to go, well, where does the fault lie with me as well in that situation? Like, you can sit and point fingers your whole life and go, it's their fault the film didn't work, or it's this producer's film, or it's Joel Silver's film. It's like, at the end of the day, you've just got to look at yourself, and the fault lies with you, right? And like, what I just have to sort of process what I did wrong in that and how I learned not to make those same mistakes moving forward. I came out of it a better filmmaker and sort of understanding the process. I think you need to go through those. Everyone says, you don't learn until you fail. You need to go through those processes of having major failures. And filmmaking's an alchemy. There's a million and one reasons why things don't work. So many things have to align to make it a good movie or TV show. I'm going to choose things in the future that I'm really into, that I'm 100% believe, that I put all my effort into, and it might not work again. It's just this game, isn't it? You never know. You never know. But just what I'm going to do now is I'm older and I'm just going to enjoy the journey more. I took it all too seriously when I was younger. I took it all too personally. I felt like I just took it all on my shoulders too much. Now I'm just like, I don't care, man. I'm just out here having some fun, making some shit, living the dream, man, living the dream.
Rafe Taylor is the global head of contemporary art at Bonhams, but before that, he helped run the Lazaridis Gallery, home to some of the most rebellious art in Europe, and also home to the failure Rafe opens up about with us. In this story, he reflects on one of the boldest shows they ever mounted, an audacious takeover of the Old Vic tunnels beneath Waterloo Station. It lost a fortune, but as you'll see, it maybe earned something far more lasting.
Yes, interesting. I mean, there are so many examples, Orlando. I mean, hundreds of examples just from today. So a good one is from the Lazaridis days. We did this project. We took on these drainage tunnels, these huge, great tunnels.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think you would have.
The Old Vic tunnels.
Old Vic tunnels, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And we took these tunnels on, like 4 or 5 square acres or hectares or whatever anyway, a big space, quite derelict, vast great tunnels. They were very high ceilings, very damp. They were sort of drainage and storage tunnels underneath Waterloo Station in London. They were very macabre, think Jack the Ripper style, but a kind of really atmospheric and extraordinary place to show art. And so we did that a few times. And so when you say fail big, I think we did it 4 times. So we failed big 4 times. But we carried on doing it and losing a lot of money. Partly because our costs on it were so big and the average price of what we were selling was maybe £5,000, £10,000 at the time. And our yield on that was, 50% after discount and whatever else. And you're making, let's say, £2,000 or £3,000 per transaction. If you're spending a couple of £100,000 out of pocket on the project and you don't have enough paintings in there to break even, you're going to fail pretty spectacularly. Now, we kind of went into that with our eyes wide open. But the financial failure was pretty astonishing, particularly after the fourth time or maybe the third time. I think, that kind of Wade's World thing. We just thought if we build it, they will come. And in the end, commercially, it wasn't a success, but brand-wise, reputationally, for the artists and for us, it was a huge success in the sense that, when we were kind of, licking our wounds financially in the aftermath, you look at the volume of, something like 50,000 people came through an art exhibit, there wasn't a museum, in some random tunnels, in a quite a scary, the access point was an underpass, full of graffiti in a sort of slightly salubrious part of London. And, so having tens of thousands of people come through, particularly on the opening night, which was bonkers, the quality of art buyer, and really influential advisors, museum acquisitions committee members, curators, and things like that came through. What we learned from it in the end was actually that financially, yes, it was a disaster, but we've been reaping the benefits ever since. Certainly, even well over a decade beyond in my time at Bonhams, the relationships that we created, and the associations that we made, and certainly for me, that experience of going to the wall pretty much financially, about actually facing up to the worst case, almost the worst case scenario, because ultimately we wrote it out, but that experiencing that kind of financial peril, not because you would like put £1 million on red in the roulette table, but you'd done something meaningful and earnest, and there's a real cultural investment in artists and the community and everything else, and you'd lost a lot of money. The benefits were great long term, but actually learning through adversity and the almost worst case scenario looks bad, but if you look at it from a different angle, it's a trite thing to say so, but it definitely taught me that you can take a few lumps and you'll come out stronger. So we didn't learn from our mistakes in that sense, but everything we did and all the success that we had was based on that willingness to be bold. And I think, we learned that actually net, it's worth not dying wondering, really giving it a whirl and being ambitious and hungry and aggressive in those kind of things, because you can't take it with you.
And it was the most audacious thing anybody was doing in London at the time, and that alone is to be commended, and commended 4 times. Well done.
I mean, it was silly, but the time, it was when Freeze Art Fair was really coming into its pomp.
Yeah.
And Steve, with his kind of man of the people hat on, used to get very worked up. The idea that if you're a civilian going to Freeze, you have to pay to get a ticket to go in and see some art, which is for sale. Right. And it didn't bother me at the time, but looking back on it, I kind of really understand where he's coming from. He was like, you don't charge someone £10 to go into, Urban Outfitters to buy a pair of jeans. This is utterly insane. So he was like, right, we're not going to change, and not going to charge. And not only are we not going to charge, we're going to, fund all the artists up front and do all this kind of crazy stuff and make it a kind of, carnival. And with the fact that we're talking about this now, no one is talking about anyone's Freeze, exhibition back in 2010 or 11 now, but everyone still remembers those projects, and it's something that I'm proud of and look back on fondly.
Kate Morrison is head of production for products and services at Google, where she oversees some of the most complex creative operations in tech. It's hard to imagine there was ever a time she didn't know nearly everything about production. But in this story, she talks about a moment early in her career when she dropped the ball by pretending to know more than she did. But she also mentions how the grace her colleagues showed her changed the way she leads teams today.
Was working on a huge IDS project, and I was, I think, the junior producer, sort of becoming a producer. And there was an era where televisions were square, and they were kind of like, they were called 4:3 televisions because they were kind of square. And then everything moved to the sort of more rectangular, like flat screen TV that we have now, which is a 16:9 aspect ratio. And what would happen is when you were trafficking things for TV, it was like, you deliver them to TV stations, when things were squares, you delivered them in squares. And when they were rectangles, you delivered them in rectangles. And there was a moment in technology where you could deliver a thing that was called a 14:9, which was like it was like an intermediary rectangle size.
I remember it well. It was the letterbox you would see on the 4x3 TV.
Correct. And it was like not really great, but I didn't know this. And I was sent to like, okay, can you just go? We've like been working on this campaign for 7 months, 20 hours a day. Can you go ship this campaign and get it out the door? And I was like, sure. And I get in there and they're like, well, do you want to deliver it in 4:3 or 16:9? And I didn't know the answer to that question. And I didn't want to say that I didn't know the answer to that question. So I said, because, well, if you deliver 4:9, it will just do both. And like, the like optimization efficiency beast, which runs so deep in me, was like, well, that seems like a great idea. So I spent the whole day sitting there, like delivering, I don't know, 30 spots or something in 14:9. And then somehow I got to the creative, or the next day they were like, would you deliver in 16:9, right? And I was like, and I was so tempted not to actually say that I hadn't, that I had done this like compromise version. And I came clean on it, and we had to delay. They had to push media because we had to miss the ship. Like, it was like terrible. And everybody was so kind to me about it, but we had to reship and spend the whole next day doing it. And 16:9 and 4:3, which it turns out was the right answer for good creative at that time. And it was just one of those things where I think you end up in life in the situation where, it's like that sort of imposter syndrome that we all talk about, where you're like, oh, I should know the answer. I feel like I should know the answer. I don't want to bother anyone with this question. I don't want to admit that I don't know the answer. And I just, in doing that, like, created a real problem it was a real fuck up, to be honest with you. And then I think the other learning on that was that everyone was so kind to me after the fuck up that it was like, oh wait, like it would have been okay to ask, like, what were you doing, And I think also just like in terms of like good leadership, what we were talking about before, like the grace of like, you didn't know, but I also should have asked. I think owning the places where you don't know and being willing to ask is really key. So that is the one that's just seared into my brain of like, I will never do that again. I also once forgot to like have all my little Excel things add up, and I like missed a row and had to make up $600,000, I think, within like a $2.6 million budget, because I had the client sign off on 2.6 million. So I will tell you, I will never, ever not double, triple check a spreadsheet before it goes out. Like double click, all the boxes in, we're good. But that is also just like, the moment when I realized, just like, when all your blood just feels like it goes straight to your toes, and you're like, where do we go now?
Yeah, that's the worst. It could have been any other line. A line for 7,000,
Yeah, miscellaneous shipping, $250. Like, no, it wasn't that guy. And you're just like, oh man. So yeah, it's funny, those moments that get really sort of seared into your brain. And there are a couple, there's many more, but it's interesting. You do, you learn more, and I hate losing, and I'm really competitive, but there is sort of this notion that you learn more by losing than you do by winning. And I think that there is a ton of truth in that. And I think it shapes your behavior. I think you have to be willing to sort of take the lessons, which is not always easy.
Lee Pavey is a VP at The Hogan and a veteran of the UK's post-production scene. In this story, he reflects on a time when expanding his hugely successful British company into LA proved to be more than they could handle. What he learned was to double down on what they did best, and that sometimes staying small is the boldest move.
When we opened in LA, we opened in London, we were a bit under the radar. No one really took us seriously. And we were, as my business partner's dad said, we were farting silk. Everything was just fucking going good. Like everything we did, it was just great. Anything bad we did, it was just brilliant. And we come from LA, and we knew people there, and we were slightly seduced. Like, we were doing music videos for people in London.
And you would have that experience at the mill out
I've
here.
been there. Like, I knew people
Yeah.
there, and Giles knew people there, and then I remember that we were working with these really talented music video guys, and we were working on a job. It had like hardly any money, and they were like, "We've just put this Super Bowl job. It's like £500,000 for like VFX." We were like, "We should be there. Why are we not there?" So we opened. We made two mistakes. We didn't follow the success pattern, what we did in London. We opened too big. And the second thing was, me and Giles knew people, we didn't go. And it impacted the business at that time because it was just knackering. We were working hard in London. You guys, like, now, this is your morning. Like, it's my end of the day. I'm like knackered, and all those people are looking to you to be excited and to be like, let's go, let's do this. And we were so it was becoming like tougher and tougher to keep that energy going for another 8 hours. You'll do your day, and when times were tough over there, they had a massive impact. People in America get paid, and in the VFX industry get paid a lot more than the UK. So if you win, you win big, but when you foul, like, and we're fully independent. It was us. Like, we didn't have any money. There was no like secret millionaire in the background going, "Yeah, don't worry, you have some losses. We'll ride that out." It was on us. So when we had losses, they was tough. And I remember going into a room and seeing like the P&L, and then walking out, and my mate was like, "You're all right. You look fucking like shocked." And I was like, we got to close it now. And that was really tough. But coming out.
And how long was that from starting to the realization, just this is not, we got to cut and run? How long was that?
We were open for about 2.5 years, maybe 3 years. I think we were open, and we had really, like, some of my favorite jobs came out of that office. They were really, really good jobs, and it just got tough. I think people took us very, like, they weren't just like, "Oh, them idiots, they'll go away," which is what I think they thought in London. They were like, "We've seen what they've done in London. We're not going to let them do that here. We're going to hang on to clients. We're going to fight, and we're going to underbid, and we're going to get them out of business as quickly as we could."
Oh, really? I see.
And
So it was just a more mercenary environment here. And because you didn't kind of set up lean like you had in the UK, you were sort of more at risk of being sort of,
yeah, there was
market forces. And
there was a point where, like, LA had half the amount of staff, but they cost more to run than London. And that was like, this is quite crazy. Like, we should have just opened, started smaller, lower risk, less fixed costs. You don't get a massive office, don't do all these things, like grow organically rather than trying to force this on people. And it was a mistake, but I think, like, learning that lesson, I'm glad we made it earlier in Electric's history, because the success that came after that in London, we knuckled down, we focused on the good thing we had. And we had Michael Bork, our chairman, and who'd been through stuff like this before, and Steph working in finance, and obviously the partners and all the staff. Everyone just, like, focused on, this is what we need to do today. This is what we need to, like, focus on the good thing we've got. And that was like, all of a sudden, it was like the rocket had been strapped to us, and the losses we incurred, we got to, like, wipe away pretty quickly. And it was just really successful. And towards the end, like, my job changed. I like being part of the creative part of it. The worst part is I literally felt like sometimes I would, the buck stops with you as a partner and as owner of the business. So, like, things that I had nothing to do with, you're apologizing for. That's tough. Wheeled out like Hannibal Lecter into a room, like, all these people are going to shout at you now and tell you, and can you make it all better? And then we'll, get back on with the job. We're going to manage. It's a bit like being a politician.
yeah. And then when you leave, we'll slag you off after you leave.
Yeah. I'm like, just use me as the bad guy. Just kick me. Put me on the floor. Come and kick me for a little while. But you know what? Like, that's part of it as well. Like, just taking it. I remember being at the mill and someone said, this job was going really badly. Can you come in and produce it? And I went into the room. The director hated everyone in the room. He said to one of the producers who he was having a row with, if you could stop, I'm going to kick you. And I was like, hang on, wait, we're not going to start kicking people. And he was only saying, he didn't mean he wasn't really going to kick someone. Went, oh, hang on a minute. And he was like, no, I'm going to kick you as well. I've just come in the room. I'm just turned up. Like,
Yeah.
and then everyone laughed about it. But I'm thinking for a second, yeah, okay, I'm going to get like, I've never been kicked before because of just trying to help. That's the story of VFX. And someone gives you a kick. I've never been kicked. I want to say that. Like, I've never been kicked in VFX, but
Just nearly.
nearly, just threatened with a kick.
Yeah.
Yeah, for something I didn't do. But that's fine. Part of life. People shouting at me. I'm used to it. Just go numb behind the eyes. I'm good in a crisis, Orlando. I'm good in. That's what it is.
Yeah. Oh, always. I've seen you in quite a few.
They're self-inflicted, those ones.
Yeah. Well, it's that the producer's trick is you've got to be the one that stays calm. I've always felt like you're a lot better at it than I sort of go quiet. I sort of try to look calm. You very often will break the tension with a joke or be, you'll calm everybody else down. I kind of go calm and just leave the room quietly.
I learned a really good trick, which was I've got a dog. She's been, like I said earlier on the call, she's been snoring and making noise, and she just taps me and hits me all the time. But I read a study that when you stroke a dog, it calms you down. So I'd have a dog with me in the office like all the time. And if I knew getting a bit tense in somewhere, I'd just like creak the door open and just push the dog in. And the dog would just walk in. She loves people, so she'd go in. Everyone would stroke her. I could hear everyone go, "Oh, whose dog is this?" And being happy. And I'm like, "I'll go in the room now." And I'd go in, I'd be like, "Oh, is everyone okay?" They'd be like, "Yeah, it's great, it's great." And they'd just stroke the dog, hang out. And it was like a real calming influence in the office. So I'm learning all the skills to like.
That is the greatest hack I've ever heard in my life. I imagine edit houses around London, if anybody watches this, which of course they won't, but I imagine if they do, edit houses around London will be getting office dogs immediately.
Yeah, get a dog, get distracted. It has to be a cute dog. The cuter it is, the more stress it can get rid of.
John Papsidera and Kim Winther are the dynamic duo behind some of Hollywood's most iconic casting, like Oppenheimer, Superman, Yellowstone, and Tenet, just to name a few. John's unflappable calm meets Kim's meticulous, detail-obsessed precision, and together they're a double act that somehow always lands on their feet. In this story, they share a few stumbles and how their balance keeps everything and everyone on track.
That's a good question.
John, you maybe have a list for Kim.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was gonna say.
Hang on, let me pull out her employee file. 1 second.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Look, I try not to. It's a funny comment. It's an interesting comment. It made me think of something that somebody said to me recently, and I'm forgetting who said it. But I know who said it. But they said. Nora Ephron said once, "Anyone that's only been married once is not that interesting." And so, fucking up, multiple times. I try and take, screw ups in stride. I try and keep a perspective that, we are not doing brain surgery. Nobody is going to die if there's a screw up. That doesn't mean that you blow over them and you don't excel for perfection. We're probably, Kim is a much more perfectionist, a much bigger perfectionist than I am. And I think it's really important. I think details are very important as a casting director and how you do your job. But nothing's so insurmountable, I don't think, that, that it can't be forgiven or that, you don't learn something from it or kind of go, it's fine, let's move on. I'm trying to think what would be a huge, it's not, I mean, I guess it's a screw up. I mean, I've told this story before, but when I went in to meet on Final Destination, the original, I just went in knowing that the writers and the director was going to be in there. They were a team. And I didn't know that there's a third person in the room, the producer. So I go in and we're talking and there's 3 people and I don't know who the third person is, and lovely guy. We're talking and I have the meeting. And at some point during the meeting, they brought up why I liked it or something. And I said, I love the Rube Goldberg aspect of the movie and those kinds of things. But I remember saying, look, you're talking to a guy that passed on American Pie. And because I didn't like it, I didn't want to have to ask teenagers to do the things that were in that script. at times. And I thought, no, I'm not doing this thing. So I left. The meeting was fine. About an hour later, I get a call from the producer in the room that I did not know. And he said, look, the good news is James and Glenn, the writer and director, they'd love to hire you for it. And even though you shit on my movie American Pie, I'm going to allow them to hire you. So I didn't know that he produced that movie. So that could have been a pretty bad fuck up, I guess, in hindsight. Craig Perry, who's a friend, could have said, screw him, he shit talked my movie. But that's how much I know. But, those things, look, I'm sure there's 10,000 things Ken could even think of when I put my foot in my mouth. Yeah. There's not a lot of filters with me at times. And so I will say things. But I think if you're around me enough, you learn to expect it. I don't know. I don't think Kim's had any real big screw ups. Have you?
Yes. Well, one that really still to this day, when I think about it, I get like a little panicked. And it was when we were going to do the remake of Ghostbusters. But then, why am I blanking on his name? Passed away. And so Ivan said, I'm tabling this film. I can't do it without him. He was one of the Ghostbusters, who was his close friend.
Harold Ramis.
Yes, Harold Ramis passed away. So we had started on it. Harold Ramis passes away. Ivan sort of tables the project. But when we were, I think there was a couple months that we thought it was happening and we were doing it. And I was an assistant at the time. And so I was sending the first sort of list, the creative list of here are all our ideas and the availabilities and photos and credits and links to material. It's this huge document of basically just like the creative thinking of the project for these two main roles. And as someone who's a perfectionist and has OCD, I, triple check every email address that I send it to. I copied all of the CCs from a different email chain from the same project, so I knew they were safe. Dragged them over, no problem. I hit send on the email. It's a Friday night. I go to Kaylee's house, and about 2 hours later, the head of casting at Fox starts texting me and calling me nonstop. And she goes, "Why can I curse?
Yeah.
Why the fuck did you send that to a manager? Why is a manager at Luber Rockland on this email? And how do they know who's in the mix for this role?" I mean, it had these are the people with notes and likes and things. And I had somehow copied some chain that either he mistakenly was on or some snafu that just... And I had a full panic attack, and I think about it to this day. And that's why I just, I think the biggest lesson is I called John in tears, and I think John was like at dinner. And I think it's sort of to the point of your boss, he, after I'd been yelled at by the head of casting at Fox for a good 30 minutes, John just said, "Listen, you fucked up. It's fine. Apologize. We'll fix it. We're not, again, we're not curing cancer over here. It's a list of ideas for a movie. By Monday, everyone will be fine and be over it." And so I think, what I took from that is what I tell every assistant. I say, triple check who you're sending an email to always. But also...
Assistants, you say that to me all the time.
Oh, yeah. I was trying... Well, sometimes,
Yeah. No, sometimes it's needed. A lot of the times it's needed.
So I try to reiterate that part, but also I really try to instill the mantra just of the office of we're all human. You're going to make a mistake. Just move on and learn from it. I've never accidentally CC'd anyone ever since then. So
you guys seem to be a great double act like that because
Yeah. Actually, she catches a lot more problems than I do.
I'm just looping people out as John is accidentally looping them in on every show.
Right. Thanks for listening to this special episode. We've got a few more coming up before we wrap season 1, then we'll take a short break and be back mid-July. If there's one thing these stories remind me, it's that no one doing great work has done it without messing up along the way. We're all just figuring it out. Sometimes loudly, sometimes messily, but always moving forward. So see you next week, and thank you for listening.